Hey there, welcome to the Colts Cover 2 podcast. For IndyStar, I am Nat Newell, our Colts editor, here with Joel A. Erickson. Whatever reason, it won't show me on the screen, but I don't think anyone's missing that. Colts are 4-1, continues to be a wild season, and we got a lot to talk about. So please like and subscribe to the podcast. We've seen a lot of growth in our YouTube channel. I want to continue that. All right, Joel, what do you want to start with? There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to try this again. This is Nat Newell for the Colts Cover 2 podcast. I'm the Colts editor. Joel A. Erickson is our Colts insider. Hopefully he can hear me after our aborted attempt there. We got a lot to talk about. 4-1 Colts. Now Joel's going to freeze up on us. Oh, nope, there he goes. Please like and subscribe. We've had a lot of growth with our YouTube page. I want to keep it going. Where do you want to start, Joel?
Here.
It looks like he still can't hear me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. It's a little bit. I feel. I don't understand why this only happens on Wednesdays.
Well, hopefully the people watching can hear us. Can you hear me now, Joel?
I can.
Right.
I can.
You can. Okay.
If it gets too slow again, I'll just switch to my phone.
Okay. Where do you want to start? Lots to talk about with the Colts.
Well, let's start with the kicking. Let's start with the kicking situation. I think this is a bigger deal than I shouldn't say than most people think, because people have been reading the heck out of the kicking stuff, but I do think this is a big deal in terms of they lose Spencer Schrader. There's not really anybody else that you can get who's going to be that kind of combination of leg strength and accuracy, because if they were, they'd already be on a team. I do think, though, that by signing Michael Badgley, you're in a spot where I think the way Shane Steichen coaches is going to change significantly, because Michael Badgley is not good from distance. He struggles from distance, and that means that Shane Steichen's they're going to have to move that target line up. I think he's going to have to be very, very aggressive in terms of going for it on fourth down, what he does in the middle of the field. I think his job just got harder between the 40s.
See, I'm okay with that. Obviously, they had a choice, if you've read Joel's story, between Hopkins, who's got a bigger leg but isn't as consistent, and Badgley, who is consistent but does not have a bigger leg. I would rather, number one, kickers are just kickers, and it can be anything can happen any year with a kicker. But I would rather have the guy who you can count on from shorter distance, forces the offense to go for it maybe a little bit more, which offenses should be doing anyway. Obviously, you got a game, comes down to a field goal. Maybe this doesn't work out so well, but I'm in favor of Badgley over a bigger leg but less consistent option.
Stop!
All right, Joel's going to switch to his phone so we can have a normal conversation, or at least as normal as we get. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but we aren't giving up, and I hope you guys aren't either. We will also be looking at, in addition to our talk about the kickers, we'll talk about signing Jermaine Pratt. We will look at the strength of schedule. They got some injuries, and we're also going to talk a little Anthony Richardson after he caught a pass this weekend. Of course, he threw the pass too, so it's not anywhere near as exciting as I'm making it out to be right off the bat. And like I said, we've been having a lot of success with our there's Joel. Let's get back to, well, now he's gone. We've had a lot of success with our YouTube page so far, so we appreciate that. We want people to continue. There we go. There's Joel. We want people continuing to like and subscribe. Anyway, Joel, I don't know how much of my stuff that you heard. I said I like to go in with Badgley over Hopkins just because I'd rather have a consistent kicker that maybe forces the offense to go for it a little bit more. Where are you at on all that?
I think it's the right decision ultimately. If you look at a guy in Dustin Hopkins, who my understanding is that was their second option. That was the other person they were looking at. He's a guy that he's got a long history in the NFL like Badgley does, and he's got a much bigger leg, but it's real haphazard between inside of 50 yards. He's like, I think he was 12 of 16 from beyond 50 the last 2 years, but he's really struggled outside of that. And I think it's much easier to deal with a kicker where you know what you're going to get in which situations, or can reasonably expect what you're going to get in most situations and plan for that, rather than have sort of the unpredictability of a guy who might miss from 30 as easily as they miss from 55.
But obviously, losing the leading scorer in the NFL, Schrader's only had one long kick this year. But this is, as you mentioned in your lead-in, this is a bigger deal than maybe it might be in other situations. The Colts have had obviously one game-winning kick this year. All the other games have been decided by more than that. But losing Schrader's not a small thing.
No. I mean, the other thing is, he'd only had the one big 50-yard kick, but it felt like that kick in Los Angeles felt like he'd figured something out there, and he does have a very strong leg. So I think you definitely do lose the possibility of the long kick. I think Brian Mason told us at one point that the end of game line. So there's not really any other options. Are we going to try one of those crazy pitch plays, or are we going to try to kick it? Type of situations was like a 65-yard kick with Schrader. It will not be a 65-yard line with Michael Badgley, and it might be something as big a difference as maybe like 10 yards shorter than that, which that's a significant difference in terms of end of game planning. They haven't played a lot of those games yet, but we all assume they're coming.
And we talked on Sunday about not understanding why you would make your holder, backup emergency holder, your snapper, and then making it difficult in the game to kick extra points. Just take me through that. I mean, on one hand, I get what they were saying in your story yesterday that Rhodes was far and away the best holder, but if you can't use him as a holder because you're worried about the operation when it happens, don't know how that helps you.
Well, that's a good point. Brian, I wonder if this is like a little bit of a disconnect between Brian Mason and Shane Steichen. Mason was saying that the biggest thing is the most important thing is the hold. That's where you have to have the most consistency and the least amount of variation. And I think that they felt like, from what sounds of it, he feels like there's a significant difference between the two of them. So that's something that they made the decision to go with the holder. They said they don't really have anybody else who can do that. There's a lot of complexity to the hold that I wasn't aware of. Like, it has to be on the right spot. And he said basically an inch off can mess that up. That's a lot more exact, I think, than most people think of that job. And he feels like with Drew Ogletree and even with Tyler Warren that they can get a short 8-yard snap. That's a little bit better than a little bit better and easier for Luke Rhodes to deal with than some of the other stuff if they have an issue. So that's his reasoning. But obviously there's disconnect a little bit because Shane Steichen cited the operation and concerns about the operation as why he didn't want to kick an extra point in any of those situations. So I don't know. I wonder if they get in that situation, does Shane Steichen feel that way? If it's, say, Rigo Sanchez that gets hurt instead of Spencer Schrader? I don't know that I have an answer to that yet.
And we'll take Rambo 25's questions out of order here because we are talking about this. How does it feel to be Brian Mason's favorite Colts reporter writer? Number one, do you think you are, since you've been critical of some things in the past? But two, we have gotten a lot of run out of special team stuff. Where do you come down on that?
Well, Rambo is referring to the fact that in the press conference yesterday, Brian Mason mentioned that they did the emergency operation in practice, and only one reporter noticed it, and it was me. And I would say, I actually don't think Brian Mason knows this. I would say, in terms of people who cover the Colts and write about the Colts, I would say I have probably more appreciation and a keener eye, not keener eye, a more interested eye on special teams than anybody. And that's probably not just the Colts beat. That's probably other beats as well. I like a lot of special teams. I don't know that Brian Mason knows that though, because I mentioned this came up a little bit while we were at the facility today, and I think the way that worked out was the Mason said, do you think any of the reporters noticed that we were doing that a couple weeks ago? And he was told, yes, there was one that did ask about it. And it was me. So I think he's just finding out now that I'm paying attention to the special teams more than he maybe realizes.
It is I've always enjoyed special team stuff too. Seems like it's an easy way to make your team better. It's something that a lot of people don't necessarily, a lot of teams don't. Obviously, every team pays attention to it, but some work on it harder than others. And it just seems like it just seems like an opportunity that a lot of teams don't take. All right, let's hit the other news today, which was Jermaine Pratt. They signed another linebacker, weak side linebacker. Former Bengal, worked with Lou Anarumo there, obviously. Bengals cut him in this offseason. And then he was with the Raiders, got cut basically after they played the Colts. Joe Bocci went on IR, did not look great at times in the Raiders game. Do you think Pratt is the answer to their problems? Knowing that they're, at this point in the game, there's no answer, but maybe you get a little closer or something there at that position.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things here. So on the one hand, bringing in Lou Anarumo veterans to take over as starting jobs has kind of not worked all that well so far for them this season. Bocci is one of them, although I don't think they intended when they signed Bocci to make him the weak side linebacker. There's another piece of that which we'll get to in a second. But Xavier Howard clearly did not work. Mike Hilton was better, but he was better because they were hiding him from coverage. It was more of he was a nickel only replacement for Kenny Moore. They weren't really putting him in positions where he could have been in trouble. So like, but Pratt, I think maybe has a chance to be better, and it's because the Colts have struggled so much at weak side linebacker so far. I was looking at Next Gen Stats, which has the coverage stats for when a defender is the closest person to the person making the reception, which there's some problem with that. Like I think Cam Bynum in that is credited with Mekhi Blackman's fall down play because he was technically the closest defender. And clearly it's not his problem. It's not his fault that Tutu Atwell got deep against the Rams or against the Colts in Los Angeles. So there's a little bit of noise in that, but Bocce on plays like that so far, it has given up 12 catches in 13 attempts. This season, Pratt with the Raiders in the 4 games he played had given up 7 catches in 13 attempts. That's significantly better. He had 25 tackles. He's got 2 pass breakups. 2 pass breakups is also more than any linebacker on the Colts, not named Zaire Franklin. And I think it's combined. I think the only other linebacker with a pass breakup is Bocce. So I think this might be a case of he can help and he can make them better because what they had was so inconsistent, and this is an actual starter. Whether or not he lifts the defense, I think remains to be seen. I also don't fully understand what happened in Las Vegas, why they released him. If you kind of poke around the internet and look at Raiders writers, they don't really have a great answer for you. And when I asked Jermaine Pratt today, and all he said was it just didn't work out. So that could mean lots of things. There's lots of ways that it didn't work out. So I don't know. I don't know exactly why because it doesn't seem like he was playing terribly there.
Jalen Carley's, any update on his status in terms of coming back?
So Carlisle is the interesting piece of this. I think this is why when Jermaine Pratt was released in June that the Colts weren't involved. I think Chris Ballard was still at that point in June thinking that Carlisle is going to win this job. Since then, Carlisle started or had some injuries at the end of the offseason. Obviously got hurt here with the ankle injury in the Baltimore joint practice or in the Baltimore preseason game. And he has not returned to practice yet. So I think we're looking probably more maybe next week for that. I think we're probably looking more next week for Jalen Carlisle. But I think at this point, Anarumo probably feels like he's been out of the defense for so long that you can't count on him to hit the ground running. Whereas with Pratt's played for him the last 6 years. It's hard not to say that.
All right. The big topic around the team has obviously been strength of schedule. This is something I dug into a little bit today statistically. Joel has no idea what I'm about to say here, so bear with me. But I guess let's start this way. Joel, how much do you think the strength of schedule matters? That they have played a terrible schedule. I shouldn't even say terrible because they've played 2 good teams. So, but they played a bunch of teams with bad records, and then the Broncos and the Rams too.
I do think it matters. I do think that maybe some of the issues that they might have are not exposed as much or are more easily hidden in these games. But also the way they're beating these bad teams and the point differential they have this year suggests to me that they're probably going to handle. And honestly, not just that, but also the game against the Rams and the game against the Broncos suggests to me that they're not going to be overmatched when they play those better teams.
Yeah, I went into this kind of thinking that I think it has to mean something, but I think it means not a lot, and that's what the numbers showed. I mean, for instance, the Colts have played. I looked at the 25 teams that have gone 4-1 since they went to the 14-team playoff. That seemed like a manageable number for me to handle, and a representative group of what to find out what was going on. One striking thing about in doing this, which is not really a surprise, is that if you want to go 4-1, it really helps to play bad teams, which there are most of these teams played poor schedule. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I ran a fancy correlation thing on Excel, and it basically says that there is a 0.2 correlation between your strength of schedule and your final record of the 4-1 teams. 0.2, I'll limit my math talk here, but 0.2 is like the bare minimum to be statistically significant. But I do think it is statistically significant that, if you are 4-1 against better teams, then you probably are slightly more likely to maintain where you're at. I will say 2 of these teams did not make the playoffs. One of them was the Los Angeles Chargers, who were one that had the tied for the second best opponents in 11. They finished 9-8, didn't make the playoffs. The other team was the 2021 Baltimore Ravens, who played teams that are combined 9-16, which is the same record as the Colts, and they finished 8-9 and didn't make the playoffs. But I can give you examples. There really is no, there's nothing that really jumps out at you here. The 3 Super Bowl teams, which is the 2022 Kansas City Chiefs, the 2020 Kansas City Chiefs, and the 2023 Kansas City Chiefs, you'll notice a pattern there. We're all in the bottom half, all below played team. They started 4-1 and played teams that were below 500. Didn't stop them from posting. I mean, one of those Chiefs teams was 11-6, but won the Super Bowl. The other 2 teams won 14 games and won the Super Bowl. 2021 Rams faced the best opponents. 15-10. They won the Super Bowl or made the Super Bowl that year. 2021 finished 12, but they only finished 12-5. So, long story short is I don't think anyone should be too concerned about the Colts' opponent schedules having some meaning that they're not good. So, are they going to go 15-2? No, I don't think so. But can they go 12-5? I think that's a reasonable guess at this point. Anything you want to do in this math-heavy segment of the podcast?
I think that there's an element of the schedule and the fast start that people kind of paper over, and I don't think I actually do think it's a real thing. Like the Colts have some momentum now, season wise. They're 4-1. Braden Smith was saying the other day that they're used to kind of being behind and chasing all season and fighting for their lives and feeling like they can't make a mistake or they're not going to make the playoffs. It doesn't work the same way when you're up 4-1. You get momentum. You can play freer. You can there's still ways that this can go bad, obviously, injuries and other things, but you feel like the thing about having a cushion is I think everyone usually thinks of that as, well, they're going to get complacent and they're not going to play hard. And there might be some element of that, but you also play more free because you don't feel the weight of the expectations sort of sitting on your head, on your chest all the time.
So the momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher. I don't believe in momentum. I think each game is pitchable, and you go out there and play. At the same time, obviously, being 4-1 is better than being 1-4 or 2-3, or as Braden Smith notes, where the Colts have often been in this situation. So I mean, it's clearly better. But I've seen some people be critical of the Colts because of that schedule. I don't want to say it's nothing. I just don't think it's that big a deal. Still, their odds of making the playoffs are very good. I think the Athletics prediction is at 84%, something like that. So I just don't see any reason to be too concerned about who they've played. And as you said, the 2 best teams. I mean, the Broncos and the Broncos could easily be 5-0. One of the reasons they're not is because the Colts beat them. The Rams have been very good, and the Colts probably should have won that game. But 2 good teams at 2 legit playoff teams. They were competitive with both. I don't care, or I only care about the other 3 games because they annihilated those 3 bad teams. So I really don't think there's too much to worry about here.
The other thing is that like a lot of the stuff under the hood, sort of the advanced statistics that people don't love us talking about on this all the time too, like expected points added and stuff like that. All of that suggests the Colts are very good. And so that's one of the things I've been watching because obviously the Colts got off to a 5-2 start in 2019 with Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback after Andrew Luck retired. All of us probably put a little too much emphasis on them starting 5-2. And if you go back, I think if I remember right, this has been long enough that it's a little hard to remember, but I think some of those underlying numbers suggested the Colts were not as good as what their record was. Right now, the underlying numbers suggest that the Colts are exactly as good as their record says. So that to me is another reason to not worry so much about the strength of schedule.
Jacoby Brissett, who could play against the Colts on Sunday if Kyler Murray can't go. So
I just was looking at his foot injury. He didn't play. He didn't practice today. That usually doesn't matter a ton in terms of whether or not they're going to play on Sunday. But it's also his foot, and Kyler Murray is famously a guy who runs around and scrambles, and that's a big part of his game. Yeah, I think that merits watching.
Speaking of injuries, Alec Pierce, Grover Stewart were back today. Kenny Moore also. It sounded like he didn't necessarily fully participate in practice, was going to be back out on the field. I don't think sounds like there's too much to be worried about with Pierce, who missed last week, and Stewart, who sat out with the game out of hand last week. Anything to share news-wise about them? And then obviously let's get a little deeper into Kenny Moore.
So Pierce is in a blue jersey again. He was last week at this time. People will probably remember that. It's not necessarily a guarantee. We found that out last week. As I mentioned, it's happened before with Michael Pittman. Generally speaking, the fact that he had symptoms again last week after practicing and had to miss, and now he's back out there right away, suggests good things, because it might have meant he just needed a couple more days. Concussions, I've said this before, I know people want concussions to be like a lot of injuries where we kind of have a sense of what's going to happen with them. That's not how they work. That's not how, especially if a player has had prior concussions like Pierce does, the symptoms are the symptoms. But it is encouraging, I think, that he's out there in a blue jersey today, suggesting that he's back to the fifth step of the protocol, because my understanding is that if you have a setback, I think you move backwards in the protocol. I don't know how far, but I think you lose some steps. So that's good for Pierce. Grover Stewart told me in the locker room, I said, "Hey, how are you doing with the bicep?" And he said, "Oh, man, I'm good." We didn't write that or report that. And a lot of times you and I will talk about this after a game, or this is maybe helpful for fans to understand. Players are not the greatest in terms of sources on their own injuries. They tend to be very optimistic in the moment, and that makes them hard to rely on. I know there've been a couple players who have thought, I'm okay. Evan Hall was one of these. Evan Hall told me after he got hurt that they avoided the worst of it, and it turned out that it was like way worse than what they thought the worst of it could be when they did the imaging.
Never played again, I think.
Yeah. It turned out to be way worse than the imaging was because of where the tear was. So, like, the thing is, on the sidelines, like, they can do an X-ray, but they're not going to do an MRI during the game. And so, on the sidelines, they do a preliminary medical examination, but it's not the same as getting the MRI. And all of this is saying there's a lot of reasons that, like, Grover Stewart saying he's good is not enough for us to report that he's good. The fact that he's at practice today, that's good, because they've done imaging on that bicep since Sunday, and that would mean that if they're letting him play, that they don't feel like it's going to be a big issue.
And what's the latest on Kenny Moore's Achilles situation? So
I'm going to have more on this on the Star here for going into Thursday a little bit later. He had a soreness in the Achilles. The fact that he didn't practice today, or we saw him not in uniform, suggests that maybe there was something in the workout they didn't like. Obviously, there's reason to be concerned with the Achilles. Like, Moore admitted that when he got hurt initially against Tennessee, he was not thinking great thoughts about where he was. He knew he didn't rupture it completely, but he was concerned, and it sounds like the information came out a little better than he thought. But at the same time, Kenny said it's also one of those things where you just cannot rush it. And I mentioned this last week. I think fans in Indianapolis probably understand that better than any sports fan base in the country right now, because of what just happened with Halliburton. So if he's not out there practicing tomorrow, I would expect Kenny Moore to miss another week, and that means Chris Lamons, because Mike Hilton is also on practice squad IR with a shoulder injury.
Yeah, the one thing you can always generally teams aren't overly honest about injuries for obvious reasons. They're not lying, but they're not always sharing the truth. But one thing that is inescapable is if they think someone's going to miss at least 4 games, they put him on IR. They did not put Moore on IR. This would be game 3. If they then put him on IR, that tells you what they're really thinking. Do you think we'll see any movement there? Do you have any idea if we'll see any movement in terms of Moore's status as we go forward here?
I don't think so, because they were willing to work him out today. They were willing to have him run. So I think there's just going to be a lot of caution with it. But I don't think we're going to see because if they put him on IR now, it's another 4 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen based on talking to Kenny today. Hard to tell, but I that's my guess is that we're not going to see that from him. One of the things that's interesting to me is if I was going to sit Kenny Moore another week because I was concerned about him and wanted to make sure he was all the way back, I would probably do it against this Arizona team. Because when I was looking at the stats earlier and looking at the Cardinals, this is a wild statistic to me. But the Cardinals pass catchers, I don't want to say receivers because it gets misleading, pass catchers, in terms of anyone who's caught a pass for the Cardinals this year, there are only 2 in the entire Cardinals roster that have more than 65 receiving yards for the season. To put that into perspective for Colts fans, Ashton Doolin has 66 receiving yards on 3 catches. This is a Cardinals team that is essentially 2 targets. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. and it's the tight end Trey McBride, and everybody else is just kind of a check down based on things like their yards per catch and stuff like that. This is a team that does not have a ton of weapons that can hurt you, and I think that probably makes it a little easier to sit Kenny if Kenny doesn't feel right, if the Colts don't feel right. I was shocked. I don't think that seems crazy to me that 5 games into the season they don't have anybody with more than 65 catches. Or 65 yards. That's what 65 yards in 5 games is what? 13 yards per game?
That's not much. And they've also lost 3 consecutive games on the last play or something like that.
Yeah.
So the Cardinals are a very weird team. So we'll see what happens when
the Cardinals. The thing with the Cardinals is this is the thing with the Cardinals. The Cardinals on offense, I think, are pretty bad. I think their run game has been good, but they're on their 4th running back now. And Kyler Murray is getting the ball out of his hands really fast, but he's also still getting sacked a bunch. So that's not good if you're an offense. I think the thing with the defense, though, is, and Daniel Jones kind of alluded to this today. He said something about they're unconventional and they're hard to read. And basically, what my understanding of what they're doing is that Jonathan Gannon's secondary is not declaring itself until maybe a second into the snap. So this is kind of getting in the weeds. I'll try to explain it as easily as possible. A lot of what quarterbacks are trying to do is figure out what a coverage is based on the way the guys line up, where they set up, that kind of thing, pre-snap. And then at the snap, when players start backpedaling, they try to figure out, was their initial pre-snap read right? Is it a different coverage? Sometimes teams will try to show one coverage and then go into a different one. What the Cardinals are doing is essentially lining up in an amoeba in the secondary, where there's a bunch of guys that there's no real rhyme or reason to the way they're lined up. And then at the snap, it takes 2 or 3 steps of the route before they actually break to where they're supposed to go. And that makes it difficult for the quarterback because it lessens the information he has in real time. So I think that's why if you look at those Cardinals games, a lot of them have been low scoring, kind of right around the 20-point marker. I don't love their defensive personnel, honestly, outside of Budda Baker, but I think that explains kind of why this Cardinals team has been able to keep these games close despite being pretty bad on offense.
All right, we'll answer our other question from Rambo25 here. There's something going on with DJ Giddens. He's not getting any carries, and Amir Abdullah scored a touchdown instead of him. Are the Colts down on DJ Giddens? Where do you come in on that, Joel?
That's a good question. I might ask someone here in the future. I've come around to the idea that the reason that Jonathan Taylor plays so many snaps and way more than most running backs, and they don't sub him, is because they're just unwilling to give up any carries that Taylor could maybe turn into a touchdown. So I don't necessarily know if I love that. I still think you could probably give somebody else some snaps, but that's the thinking behind it. And you do understand the way games have gone this year, where a lot of them, the first half has been kind of slow going in the running game, then he breaks out in the second half. Why maybe you don't want to give up some of those possibilities. With Giddens and with the Abdullah thing, I kind of forgot to ask that actually earlier this week. That is interesting that they went with Abdullah down there, because I thought of him as a pass catching back more so than a goal line type player. I would think of Giddens as the between the tackles player, if you were asking me. Did they just want to get Abdullah a touchdown against the Raiders, his old team? It was kind of later in the game.
My only point was going to be the score was so out of hand. Did it matter who they put in there? Giddens' numbers have not been great, very small sample size. But you do wonder if he just hasn't shown them enough. They need a backup running back who they trust.
There was a play in the last game where they got a pressure and Jones flipped it out to Giddens, and it didn't look like Giddens was ready for it. And I think it was kind of the hot receiver style play that they had with Anthony Richardson in the preseason, where he got hit hard. And I did wonder if that was a mistake, and that might explain some of this stuff.
But they definitely need a backup, someone who can take some of the heat off of Taylor. You can't have Taylor running it 25 times a game, which they have done once this year. Although I get what you say that Taylor can take it to the house at any point. I just think you have to be disciplined enough as a coach to not burn out your star. Just to win one game, or not even necessarily to. I mean, if it's an obvious chance to win, you probably have to do it, but give the backup a little more of a run just to see what he is there.
One of the interesting things about the way this has worked with Taylor this season is that for the most part, I think in every game they've thrown early and run late, and that has sort of kept Taylor's carries from getting too out of control right now.
Yeah.
Because he's had a bunch of 17, 18, 15 carry games. But the flip side of that is, against these better teams, when they start playing them, they're not there yet. But once they start playing these better teams, are you going to hand it to him 25 times in a row over and over again? Or are you going to give him a break? Because it doesn't seem like they're going to give him a break right now.
It does not. All right, let's wrap up with the Anthony Richardson stuff. There was a report. I don't know if it was a report. It was speculation, I think, more than a report, that Richardson wouldn't mind being traded. I'm looking at this more wide, big picture, as opposed to thinking there's anything really going on here. I don't know why the Colts, if you trade Richardson, you need to get a backup quarterback back. Someone who you have some confidence in. So I don't think making a trade now makes a lot of sense. There are some salary cap reasons where after the season you might want to move him. But Richardson today said that he's happy in Indy. What else is he going to say when he's asked? Where do you come down on Anthony Richardson?
I don't think he's the guy you trade for if you need help at quarterback right now. I don't know that, a lot of times if you're going to trade somebody near the trade deadline, it's because there's a huge need there immediately. Like if you look at the trade the Bengals just made, they're going to start Joe Flacco this week, even though they just traded for him yesterday. They're going to start him right away because they just don't believe in Jake Browning. The difference between Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson is obvious. Joe Flacco has seen everything, and he's not anywhere near like a starting quarterback level type of player right now in his career. You at least know he can pick up the offense. One of the questions around Anthony Richardson is, can he pick up an offense? And I don't know that you bring in a player who's like that mid-season to try to learn your offense and run it, which I would think lessens the need for a trade from outside. Like not even from a Colts standpoint, from a point of an acquiring team. If you're looking for quarterback help right now, aren't you looking for somebody more experienced than Anthony Richardson?
Well, number one, Richardson literally beat Flacco out for playing time last year. It seemed like so maybe
Well,
he is better than Flacco, but I think the teams you see are. I mean, like the Raiders have been mentioned, where they're not going anywhere this year. I don't think that you're going to play Richardson immediately, but if you're 5-10, do you put him out there for the last 2 games? Do you think? But it gets back to the compensation to me, which is, I think if I'm the Colts, I need a backup quarterback back, and I'm going to tell you, I'm giving you Richardson so you don't need your backup quarterback anymore. So I also need a draft pick back, and fourth round pick. I think if I could get a backup that I liked and a fourth round pick for Richardson, I'd have to think long and hard about it. But I also don't know if you're like you say why do that if you're a team in the NFL? Why would you? I almost think you have to have some kind of think you're getting a deal on Richardson
and
to make it. I just don't see that happening because why would the Colts? There's no based on what we haven't heard that Richardson's a problem by any stretch.
right.
So why would you trade him now and disrupt? Even though I think it's this much disruption wise, but why would you take that chance with the way things are going?
If I was the Colts, the way I would price Richardson too is not what Richardson's value is alone. I would say the price you're going to pay, and this, you kind of alluded to this, but the price you're going to pay is the price of me losing a backup quarterback.
Right.
Because Riley Leonard is not really a backup quarterback. You don't feel great. He's a developmental guy who you hope turns into a backup quarterback down the line, but he's not one right now. And so, if a team comes to me and says, I want to pay this price based on this comparable quarterback, I would say, okay, well, when that trade happened, did that team lose their primary backup? Because that's what I care about. I'm
Right.
losing my primary backup. So, whatever you think Richardson is worth as an acquiring team, my valuation on him is I don't have a good backup quarterback situation anymore. And I'm a team that's going to the playoffs.
And why would you give him away in that case when there's no need to? The reason to eventually deal him is because I believe it's something like 10 million dead cap.
His cap number goes up. Yeah.
And it's 5 million if you trade him, I believe. So certainly there's more motivation for the Colts to trade him in the offseason. We are not reporting this in any kind of way, shape, or form. I kind of think there had to be some deal where they went to him and said, "Hey, we know this isn't what you want. Let's play it cool for this season, and then we'll make something happen for you in the offseason." I don't know why you wouldn't do that as a team because he hasn't caused any problems. But if I'm Anthony Richardson and you tell me I'm the backup next year too, I might want to cause some problems at that point. Although maybe that torpedoes my value with anyone. I don't know. It's an interesting situation, but I'd be surprised if he's moved, despite all the talk out there.
I agree with that. The other thing I think is, there was some talk this season about, off season about, well, we've got Daniel Jones in there. He can run the same offense as Anthony Richardson. That's not really true. Yeah. That was pretty much just, fodder to sort of justify something. I don't think you can go with that because Jones isn't running. They're not using him on design runs. Like he's being used as a pocket passer, field general type. He's not playing the same style of offense as Anthony Richardson. So I think when you get to the off season, in the event that he continues to play like this, you're signing him to the Darnold Mayfield deal that we talked about last week. If you want a quarterback who can do something more like the offense you're running with Flacco, that's not Anthony Richardson. And so maybe for the exchange, and his cap number is going up because he's getting to the end of his rookie deal. And so you probably get some cap savings there. And then you get a player who fits what you're actually doing more so than like the theory of just Daniel Jones being able to run, because Daniel Jones, he's not really running. He's playing pocket quarterback.
And in the offseason, you don't need, as you didn't say this outright, but this is what you're alluding to, is you can go get a backup quarterback that you like,
right.
And you trade Richardson just for a pick. And it seems like that's a more reasonable approach. Now, again, if you had a good backup that if your team going nowhere and you have a good backup quarterback, there's no reason not to trade him. You alluded to this on Twitter about kickers. Why wouldn't you trade? If you were a team going nowhere, why wouldn't you trade your good kicker for some kind of fourth round pick? I mean, I would look long and hard at that. That's not done in the NFL, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be. And obviously, with the Colts needing kicker, that's why we're talking about it. But it's just interesting to me that I would think if you got a fourth round pick offer for Richardson, you'd almost have to do it.
Yeah, you and I are both baseball guys, and actually, former coworker Jim Aiello is the one who brought this up first. But why don't teams do that?
The only reason I can think of is that in football, your odds can flip pretty quick, or your success can flip fairly quickly. And maybe if you had a good kicker who was on a multi-year contract, you wouldn't want to do it. But also, like I've alluded to, kickers are inconsistent. Even the good ones can be inconsistent. So I don't know why you wouldn't do that. If I didn't think I was going anywhere and I had a good kicker, he's not doing me much. He's not doing much for me. I would be happy to deal him for a fourth round. And you're not going to get, no kicker gets drafted for the most part. So to get a real pick for him, I just don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Jim's likened it to like trading for a closer, and that really is a good example, because closers are also very volatile. They're typically not signed to large, lengthy deals outside of like the elite, and you're probably not trading the elite. The NFL should do more stuff like that. Like if you can get an asset out of something, and I don't know about the acquiring teams. If you're a team that's not going anywhere, if you're the Saints or the Jets and you're 1-4, you're 0-5, and you're not going to be good. Why, especially if you're the Jets, why not trade Nick Folk? Nick Folk is like 37.
The future, Nick Folk is not your kicker of the future, and you could go find someone who's younger and good. I mean, Folk's been good for a long time. I'm not putting him down, but I'm just saying you could find another kicker or try a couple of guys out and see who you like, see who you don't. It doesn't make any sense.
Right, like if you're the Jets and you lose a game because you miss a kick, oh well,
that gives you a better draft pick.
You're gonna lose a bunch of other games for a lot of other reasons that. Who cares? Like, I don't know. It's weird that the NFL doesn't do that more. That kicker especially seems like maybe the more unique position. I was thinking that maybe part of it was that the trade deadline is so much earlier in football than it is in baseball. But there are still, 5 or 6 teams right now that should know that they're not turning this around.
Yeah, and why not trade your kicker? The only other thing I can think, and the other thing in terms of relievers, especially closers, generally there are some that are just guys that pitch in the ninth inning, but it's hard to find them. Like I say, kickers you can find. I mean, the guy the Colts had, who I'm totally blanking on his name at the same time as Blankenship, Chase McLaughlin.
Yeah,
was actually very similar to Badgley in that he was a good, consistent short range kicker, couldn't kick the long kicks. So the Colts cut him, and he's been a great long distance kicker.
Incredible.
He's
been awesome in Tampa.
There's no way to know that was coming by anyone. So why not hope you get Chase McLaughlin? Guess what? If you pick someone up who's not Chase McLaughlin, then go out and try to get the next one. There's a bunch of guys who want to kick. So I just don't get that at all. But,
no, it doesn't make sense, especially since it would make sense if you're the Colts. If you're the Colts getting Badgley because you feel like he's going to make kicks inside the 50-yard line at a 90%-ish clip. I get that because it does help you as a playoff team. If you're not a playoff team, who cares?
Yeah, it makes no sense. We got a couple quick questions here from John Jacobs to finish up. Or I guess it's not a question. Alec Pierce should wear a Guardian cap during the game. After Guardian caps were a huge deal, 2 years ago? I've not heard the phrase Guardian cap since that till John Jacobs. I did notice someone on the Monday night game wearing one. I can't even remember who it was now. I guess it's worth asking Pierce if he's going to do it. There was some research that said Guardian caps help, not a lot, but in a concussion deal, I don't know why you wouldn't take every advantage. Any opinions on this comment?
So we can't ask Alec about it until he's out of the concussion protocol. Players are not allowed to do interviews while they're in the concussion protocol. The the comparison here, the obvious comparison is Romeo Dobbs from the Packers. Romeo Dobbs from the Packers wears a Guardian cap because he's had concussion issues. And he's got this big head. He's got this big, helmet-looking helmet. Like, that would be – Alec Pierce is the sort of player who probably it's hard to know, because I think Jonathan Taylor explained that a lot of the new age helmets are supposedly so good that they're the same as having a Guardian cap on. But Dobbs, my understanding is that Dobbs is like, well, I've had concussions and it's cost me time, and so I'm just going to do whatever I can possibly do to try to avoid it. Pierce is probably in that spot now, 3 concussions in 4 years. It's definitely something to ask whenever he's out of the concussion protocol and we can talk to him again.
And then John is here trolling me. Again, not a question, but a statement, but a fair statement. Tyler Warren is a beast. Can't believe the Bears didn't take him. Not a new opinion, but I am in no position to criticize anyone's Tyler Warren takes. I mean, you want to spend 60 seconds raving about Tyler Warren, or you could take your 60 seconds and just make fun of me for saying what I've said about him.
No, I'm going to take my 60 seconds and make fun of the Bears and draft analysts in general. So the thought was that Tyler Warren wasn't going to be that Tyler Warren wasn't going to be able to be a downfield receiver. He's averaging almost 14 yards per catch. That's a lot for a tight end. It's a lot for a receiver, honestly. Like, this happens in the draft where they talk themselves out of things. And, like, the Colts are scheming it up. Yeah, that's what you do with tight ends. You don't line up tight ends one-on-one with somebody and say, go do a go route like Alec Pierce. Like, there's always going to be a schematic advantage in that. And the Bears kind of made this decision where they were like, let's have one guy in Cole Kmet who's all around and one guy who's a receiving tight end. Why not both? I don't understand why you wouldn't want both guys to be all around guys. The defense never has any idea what you're doing in that situation. It makes no sense to me. I think this is like a classic case of talking yourself into something because you've been evaluating the players too long and you decide to focus on something you shouldn't focus on.
Yeah, and I will say, as I did on Sunday, the last straw for me, we were in the press box talking about Warren, and someone you might have brought up the Bears, and I said, I really don't want to be on the same side of the Bears in any decision. So that is worth giving up my ill-fated opinion on him. And now John is going to go full troll on me, definitely sub-YouTubing me with mentioning Downs too. Downs is not Welker. Warren is not Gronk yet. I don't know that saying that he's not going to be Gronk. I mean, Gronk might be the best tight end of all time. So let's wait a little bit. But you can be not as good as Gronk and be a Hall of Fame tight end, but which Tyler Warren gives every indications of. I think my actual take on Downs, which is it's really hard to be a big time receiver at his size, still holds. But he's certainly an excellent. He's not ever going to put up Welker numbers. The numbers Welker put up with Brady, I don't think. But obviously Downs is a real nice player, a real nice piece. And then we didn't talk about this Sunday, but Downs hadn't done a ton this year. But when they needed him to step up, he was there, and that's another impressive thing about this offense, that they are that deep, that they have this many weapons, that Josh Downs, who has an obvious skill set that can be beneficial, hadn't been needed. And again, he had done a little bit, but hadn't really needed to be featured. But then he was ready to step up when they have to play Ashton Doolin in place of Pierce.
I think as teams adjust to what they're seeing from Daniel Jones, I think Downs is going to play a larger role, but not because I think just because teams are going to try to play back and try to take away the explosive play. Early in the season, teams were blitzing Daniel Jones left and right. It didn't work at all. It allowed them to get them down the field, and I kind of think teams are going to back off and try to make them drive the length of the field. I don't really think that's going to work. I think that plays to what Jones is doing, but I do think that's probably what's going to happen, and that probably means more catches for downs. I don't know that he's ever going to be a downfield threat.
And I will disagree with Eric here. If you're as good as Gronk is, who never, as far as I know, never did anything that had any. Obviously, there's goofiness, but none of it seemed to impact what happened on the field. I will take the best tight end in NFL history and whatever level of non-impact on the field goofiness he wants to give me anytime. Again, Warren certainly is. This is probably my media bias here, and that Warren is a terrible quote. But no doubt he is an excellent.
I do think he is sort of the avatar for maybe what the new age version of a Gronk could look like, because the sort of inline tight end blocker that Gronk was with the downfield threat as a receiver, you're going to get less of that because of the way college programs are. But the flip side of that is that the thing that makes Warren special as a blocker is really the fact that they can line him up anywhere. He can do anything. And so that's sort of like an evolution type thing for me as for tight ends. All NFL coaches want to be able to stay in something close to the same personnel and run a bunch of different stuff, so they're hard to read. Warren allows them to do that.
And we're going to end the podcast now before someone else comes on here and attacks my incorrect views. Please like and subscribe our YouTube page. Go to IndyStar.com for more, and we will see you Sunday night.